The Fast and the Furious is a franchise that is hated by a lot of people. Some people don't like the way that the franchise has turned out. You know, it used to be about illegal street racing, but as the movies kept rolling out, it has become more and more like Grand Theft Auto. It's being more story-oriented with a lot of action stunts and big heists, and racing has become more of an afterthought. Other people don't like the stories or think that it's too repetitive, and it's gotten to a point where people just want these movies to stop. Now, I grew up liking the Fast and Furious. I've always loved cars and racing games as a kid. Midnight Club 2 was a great PS2 arcade racing game of its time, for instance. And the Fast and Furious for me has always been about action-packed fun. A movie where I can just sit back, relax, chill with my friends, eat some snacks, and have a good time. The stories to me aren't what make the Fast and Furious. It's the characters, the action, the insane stunts, and the epicness. Highly unrealistic, but fun. And you have to realize that as a viewer to find some enjoyment in these type of movies. When you've been watching these movies for a while, you learn to love these characters and are always interested on what their next adventure might be. And I like how these movies intertwine with each other to create this one big universal story. But now, what are we up to? I mean, there's a spin-off movie releasing tomorrow. There's supposedly 2 more movies after that. I think they are milking the series quite hard, but I mean, I'm not going to complain if they make more. And you shouldn't either. I mean, if you don't like these movies, just don't watch. It's as simple as that. I do think that they should have stopped these movies, like, after Paul Walker passed, like after Furious 7. I think that would have been the perfect send-off, because the tribute to him at the end was very heartwarming. But I did enjoy The Fate of the Furious, the movie that came after that one. And I mean, they can keep these movies coming, it could just be under like a different name. In this video though, I want to talk about each and every one of these Fast and Furious movies in chronological order. And just a warning, there will be spoilers. But before that, I want to quickly mention a 2002 classic film called Better Luck Tomorrow. I'm not going to talk too much about it because I just reviewed it, but let's just say that this movie can be interpreted as the high school life of Han, a prequel before the Fast and Furious. Do you need to watch this movie to understand the Fast and Furious? No. Does this movie relate to the Fast and Furious in any way? No, absolutely not. But do I recommend this movie? Yes, I definitely do, and make sure to check out my review or the movie if you are interested. Okay, let's look at the entire timeline for the Fast and Furious because it is slightly confusing. Here is the correct order for the Fast and Furious movies for those of you who don't know. The events in Tokyo Drift, while being the 3rd movie released, actually happens after the 6th movie. This is slightly confusing because Han dies in Tokyo Drift, but then he reappears between like Fast and the Furious 4 and 6. Now here's what a lot of people don't understand. The Fast and Furious movies has actually never been just about racing. And that was surprising to me. It's been a long time since I revisited these movies, but I did, and all this time I thought that the earlier movies were very focused on racing. With the exception of Tokyo Drift, which does its own thing and is something I'll talk about later, the Fast and Furious has been mostly about crime and drama, and racing is kind of like a side thing. Like how in Fast and Furious 1, Brian O'Connor, played by Paul Walker, worked as an undercover cop and posed as an illegal street racer to bust down Dominic Toretto. I thought that movie had a fantastic story and I really enjoyed it. It's what started this whole franchise. Same with the sequel, Too Fast, Too Furious, this time with a completely different story. With Paul Walker teaming up with Tyrese Gibson as Roman Pierce as undercover cops to take down a drug lord in Miami. Same intent, different characters and story, but it was a lot more hilarious and there was more racing involved. These 2 movies were what started this whole franchise, and even though it was rated pretty poorly by critics, I thought that they were awesome. They were essentially crime drama films, and modern Fast and Furious is like that as well, just with bigger stunts. I do agree that the earlier Fast and Furious movies do have a lot more racing involved, but you're wrong if you say bring back the Fast and Furious where it was all about the racing, because it never has been. And I was surprised. It's amazing what social media can does to you, what the amount of effect that it has on you. Like, I can't count the amount of times I've seen someone say that the Fast and Furious movies are trash and they should have stopped making them ages ago, like after Fast and Furious 5, for instance. Seriously, it feels like I've almost been brainwashed to hate the Fast and Furious all these years. Like, I expected to hate the Fast and Furious movies before I rewatched them, but after I watched them, because I haven't done so in a very long time, it just reminds me to all the good memories I've had with this franchise and the movies. The turbocharged prelude, which happens after Fast and Furious 1 and before Fast and Furious 2, honestly, there's not really any reason to mention this one. It's just like a 6-minute post-credit scene for the first movie and kind of details what happens and sets the events in motion before Too Fast, Too Furious. It's just Brian traveling to Miami. There's not really much. Los Bandoleros, however, is a longer 20-minute short that shows what Dom's been up to all these years since he was missing in the second movie. And it kind of introduces Han as a character. Even though he was introduced in Tokyo Drift, the events of that film hasn't taken place yet. Moving on to the fourth installment in this franchise. It feels like a huge jump between the events of Too Fast, Too Furious and this movie, 5 years to be exact. At the end of that movie, Brian and Roman were talking about opening up a garage, but in this movie, Brian is back as an undercover cop and Roman is nowhere to be seen. I mean, come on, man, I love that guy. This is probably my least favorite movie of the series, and I say that because I just came from watching a very fun Too Fast, Too Furious. So this movie felt very underwhelming, and I felt like the story was very boring. It also lacked some characters which I felt could have made a movie a lot better. Roman and Tej were missing, and we find out that Letty got killed. Along with that, there was only one race in the whole entire movie. But we do see Gal Gadot as Gazelle. Han appears for the first few minutes, but then disappears throughout the whole entire movie to go to Tokyo. I don't think it has anything to do with the events of Tokyo Drift just yet though. Maybe he made friends with DK during that time. Fast 5. Now this is where I think the movies start getting a whole lot better. In this movie, the old gang reunites to take down a gang in Brazil while the police is chasing after them. This is the first movie in the series where we are introduced to The Rock as Luke Hobbs, whose sole purpose in this movie was to track and hunt down Dominic Toretto. But eventually they work out their differences and work alongside each other to take down a much bigger threat. This movie also introduces us to some very amazing stunts, which were so entertaining to watch. Tyrese Gibson and Ludacris are back, and they bring back the humor that was in Fast 2 that was missing from Fast 4. It was also nice to see Han and Gazelle back as well. But then again, there's like hardly any racing in this movie. It's like more about the story now. The Fast and Furious 6. Now, I feel like this movie had the most interesting story and the most insane stunts. And these movies have been less about racing and more about car chases and action stuff. And honestly, they're still pretty good. I mean, these movies know exactly what they're doing, and that's to provide us with some action-packed fun. The plane scene was great, highly unrealistic, but super entertaining to watch. In this movie, Hobbs contacts Toretto for another job, but this one is actually very extremely important. Their goal was to hunt down Owen Shaw in London and to try to get in contact with Letty again after realizing that she is still alive. But the bad news is they find out that she has lost all her memories and doesn't recognize any one of them anymore. Whereas in the previous movie it just felt like your average action movie with a very generic story, this one actually felt like it had a purpose. And I think it might be my most favorite movie of this franchise. This is the movie that kind of finishes the whole story arc of the last 3 films ever since Fast and Furious 4. And the post-credit scene happens after the events of Tokyo Drift. Now, Tokyo Drift. Han dies, the Yakuza, a cowboy. That's basically all you need to know, to be honest. But seriously though, a lot of people hated this movie, but I personally enjoyed it a lot. Sure, we don't have the original gang. The main protagonist and the girl he liked aren't the most interesting. But I like the story, and I think it introduces the Japanese culture and Han as a character quite well. And with Han being possibly my most favorite character in the series, I can get around that. Looking at this franchise as a whole, I think it ties in with its overarching story quite well. It signifies the end of this arc of the franchise and welcomes the next. If you want a Fast and Furious movie that's all about racing, this is it. Racing is at this movie's core. Like, it's not anything else, really. The Fast and Furious 7. A few words to describe this. Highly unrealistic, action-packed fun. I absolutely loved the stunts in this movie. The car to building jump though, wow. They really know how to make the scene feel bigger and more epic with the slow motion cam, the audio drowned out, almost like how it feels in real life when your heart skips a beat. This is the first movie that features Jason Statham as Deckard Shaw, a guy who is looking for revenge for his brother from the previous movie. This movie was great, although it was kind of missing The Rock for like almost all of this movie, and the story does kind of get messy towards the end. I will give them the benefit of the doubt though, because they did have some difficulties with shooting this project with Paul Walker passing away. So this film was delayed, and it had some parts of it had Paul Walker CGI, which honestly wasn't that noticeable in my opinion. This is the movie where it just felt perfect to just stop. Like, it felt like the perfect send-off. Now, The Fate of the Furious is the latest Fast and Furious movie and is basically about Dominic Toretto turning rogue and going against his team. But we learned that he had a good reason for this, and that was to save his baby boy. And I really like the story because of this. I remember watching the trailer got me really excited for the movie because I was like, damn, why is Dom doing this? And I was pretty excited to find out why. This story was still kind of messy though and convoluted. Although like many other Fast and Furious movies, they're not really known for the story. More so for their over-the-top action sequences and stunt scenes, and my god can you tell. It had a giant swinging ball wreaking havoc, Roman hanging off a car door that was sliding on ice, and this very glorious fight scene in prison. Ronnie, cue the music. I don't know why they teamed up with Jason Statham though, the guy who was causing so much trouble in the previous movie, and the guy who killed Han, my favorite character of the series. He seemed to turn friendly way too quickly. But here you have it. Here's how I would personally rank the Fast and Furious series. Not including the shorts of course, because they're not actually movies. You know, if I had to rate the shorts, they probably would have got the worst grade in this franchise, but whatever. And to answer the question, the Fast and Furious movies are so bad that it's good. And I freaking love it. Guys, thanks so much for watching. What do you think about the Fast and Furious series? Do you like it or hate it? Please leave a comment about your thoughts below. Like the video if you liked it, and drop a sub to help the channel out. Also, feel free to check out my previous video. Until next time.